Right, thanks very much. I'm a geologist. I'm not corporate management, so I don't have an ESG slide for you. I'm very sorry about that. But I'll try to keep this nice and believable. There's our disclaimer. You can read that on the website at your leisure. I'll start off with our board and management. We do have an experienced board. We've got Les Piera, who is our company chairman. Chris Dawes. Chris Dawes can't be here this week. He's representing WA in over 50s hockey over in Victoria. Doing quite well, so there you go. John Kingswood, Steve Brockhurst, of course. And I'd like to also acknowledge Neil Hutchison. Neil resigned from our board this year because he got too busy elsewhere. But Neil was instrumental in our discovery of carboid. So, yeah, thanks for coming along, Neil. Estrella at a glance. We've got two projects. One is the Carboid Intrusive Nickel project. That's located about 80 k's north-northeast of Kalgoorlie. And that's been explored for many, many years. And like I said, Neil had some success there about 3 years ago. That's been pretty interesting. Following on from that, we've done about 45 k's of drilling, and we now have an exploration target of between 35,000 and 105,000 nickel metal tonnes. And that's on the back of a resource on the T5 discovery of around 6,000 nickel tonnes. We only have resourced a small portion of T5, but that helps us understand the sort of grade distribution that the basal contact's going to give us, and that underpins that exploration target. We have the Spagoville nickel project, which is just outside of Kambalda. That's a very interesting little project, and we're going to look at transitioning that into some production later on next year. I'll start on Spagoville. This is a picture of the 5A pit. The 5A pit was mined probably in 1968. Discovered in 1968, but it's a very interesting little project, so we'll talk in that some detail. In 2017, we picked up the nickel rights to the Spagoville project, which consists of three mining leases. There are 4 deposits on those mining leases. Most of them have been developed. There are remaining resources at those, and we're going to look to transition those into production. Unlike most of the deposits around Kambalda, who were named after the drillers that discovered them, ours were named 1A, 5A, 5B, and 5D. I'm sorry about that, but that's what it is. Maybe we'll find some new names for them, but that's what they're called for now. The 5A deposit itself has got some pretty high grades, as you can see there. Our first drill hole into this deposit was coming up some pretty good grades. We did some drilling earlier this year because the initial resource that was done 4 years ago said that we had fresh sulphides below this pit. I didn't quite believe that, and of course we've drilled it and subsequently found that yes, there's a lot of transitional sulphides there. They're pretty high grade, as you can see from that. The total resource, if we include at a 0.5 cutoff, is about 1.9%. However, the high grade sulphides within that, we can expect to upgrade that and get that out of the pit at around 4.5%. So we're going to look at taking a 2,000 tonne met sample, probably at the end of this month, maybe early November, and that we'll put through a plant. We've done some bench test work back in 2019, said it's amenable to this alternative processing. So we'll take a 2,000 tonne sample out of the pit, put that through, and that will begin to inform our DFS. That DFS will be due out probably early next year, and then we'll look at transitioning this pit into mining. Just briefly, the 5B deposit, that's only about 1 kilometre from the 5A. There was initially a gold pit was put on top of this nickel resource. A decline, 700 metres of decline was put down next to it. They drilled this resource from underground. It's I guess, I won't get technical, a type 1B type of deposit. It's wide, it's disseminated, about 16 metres true width, but it's fairly low grade, probably about 1.5–2%. But it needs some extra work to bring that up to JORC compliance. There's low-hanging fruit also at the Andrews deposit, where we've got an oxide cap. That's amenable once again to the technique that we're looking to extract the nickel from 5A. And then, of course, we've got something called the 1A deposit. Now, that is some kilometres north, Typical northern end of the Widgiemalta Dome has 3 thrust surfaces. It's been duplicated a number of times. It's been mined, so that one's quite a bit more difficult. But there's certainly some low-hanging fruit that we can extract some value from. And really our pathway through to production is starting with this 5A deposit. Then we'll move on to 5B, see what we can extract out of that. And really all of those funds that we gain from mining those deposits we'll put into the exploration of Carboid. Carboid's our real main target. Carboid's a large intrusive deposit. It's been known about for many, many years, some 60 years or so. However, the models that have been used previously have not really recognised what it is, and there's a lot of nickel science that's coming out nowadays to actually explain to us the various classifications of intrusive nickel that there are out there. There's a lot of dynamics in these systems, and of course we're putting a lot of science into trying to understand what that is. Carboid initially was a small little underground mine, mined by WMC back in 1972 to 1976. They extracted about 3,000 tonne of nickel out of there and 1,000 tonne of copper. There is a remnant resource, which is about 3 times that amount. Once again, not JORC compliant. We need to bring that into JORC compliance. But essentially, Estrella acquired all of these tenements, and you can see the intersection that Neil made. That's Neil's hand over there on the left-hand slide. That was an absolute cracker. The first time in 50 years that nickel sulfides have been hit at Carboid. Once again, that's made on the basal contact. Since then, like I say, we've done a lot of work to come up with a JORC compliant exploration target and a small resource at T5 itself. The drill hole on the right-hand side, that's Broon Hill. That's part of our ongoing exploration. We've discovered nickel sulfides there. That's about another kilometre from T5. So within these 3 kilometres, in about 3 or 4 kilometres, there's been 3 significant lots of sulfide found within this channel. It's starting to get pretty interesting. So we recognised that we needed to spend quite a lot of time to understand this. We need to put a lot of science in. Now, I'll start the slide off by stating categorically that the Carboid deposit is not below Kalgoorlie, it's not below Boulder, and it's not below the super pit. But that does give you some idea of the relative size of this intrusion. And for a small company like that, like us, to bite off something the size of Kalgoorlie, Boulder, and the super pit, it requires us to do some pretty smart stuff. So I guess the mission statement that exploration came up with is highlighted at the top of the slide. And of course, if I had these here, I'd be able to read it off for you because my glasses don't focus very well on that one down there. But I will be more practiced at this one day. So at the end of the day, basically, we need to contextualise Carboid. What is Carboid in a regional sense, not just a local sense? Like I say, Carboid's been known about for many, many years, but unless you have a regional sense of what these intrusions are, then you don't know how you're going to accumulate nickel within them. So we've had to really go back to the basics and start right at the bottom level and unpack the whole of Carboid. How is it that it took 50 years really for explorers who drilled 161 kilometres of drill core at Carboid? How did it take 50 years for us to then come in and find another intercept? So if we understand that, it won't take us another 50 years to find the next one. Well, how did they do it? Well, Carboid, as you can see in that central photo, is essentially just a big sulfide breccia within a gabbro. Contextually, by itself, which is all the guys had to go on, it doesn't make much sense. We need to put a lot more science into that, and luckily spearheaded by the CSIRO, there's some very good science that's coming out that tell us that the initial classification of Carboid, as you can see on the left-hand side there, with the breccia pipe and these sulfides mobilising upwards, is actually absolutely impossible. Physically, it's impossible. Sulfides don't go upwards; they just cannot. It's probably akin to trying to squeeze the water out of a jelly by stepping on it. It might be fun to do, but it's not real. You're not going to get the water out of it. So at the end of the day, we need to contextualise Carboid, come up with a much more realistic model and put it in a regional framework so that we can understand what's going on. So what does back to basics look like? Well, essentially we take something very similar to the central image there, which is the normal nickel model. You have magma, it's going from A to B, you introduce a collecting agent such as sulfide, you trap that in some point with the aid of gravity, and hopefully Bob's your uncle. But then how do you apply that and complexify it enough that it works for what your data is telling you, yet is not too overly complex? So there's a bunch of questions that we need to ask that have never really been asked. The last major study done on carboid was in 1972, and that's the science has really moved on since then. Excuse me. So without the context of what it is that you're actually looking for, without this geological context, you cannot have a model that is going to inform you drill hole by drill hole. Are you getting closer? Are you getting further away? We really need to understand things in much more depth. Some of the answers I'll just briefly go through with you. Carboid is around about the same age as the top of what we call the Sir Walter Williams Formation. That is the formation that hosts most of the Kambalda deposits. So in fact, it's that age. It's really been an integral part of the process that's formed Western Australia. So it's very, very old. And that does tell us a few things of what we expect in the system. We've got a lot more energy in the system as we might do than we might do in something that is just a nova-style intrusion, for example. There's a lot of energy in that system, but there's not as much turbidity as what we're seeing in our systems. So it's the context of where your deposit is, where it sits, how deep it is, where it sits in the framework is certainly governed by age. Also, knowing the age also means that you know what to expect once you go through 2.7 billion years of deformation. And we're certainly seeing the results of that at our deposit. The sulfides of carboid themselves, we did some work on those. We drilled a hole through carboid, and we can categorically state that the carboid, the initial carboid rocks deposit, has nothing to do with the basal contact sulfides. In fact, it has been formed from a magma that formed a deposit much lower elsewhere in the system, got depleted of PGEs, and then came through, reacquired sulfides and formed the carboid sulfide deposit. So this starts to give you a sense of the dynamics that we can have in these systems. We also went through and did a lot of understanding the basal contact and the position, because at the end of the day, we're trying to de-risk our dollars. We did a lot of seismic work, and some very interesting things have come out of that. I'll touch on this idea of paleogravity. Paleogravity is essentially which way was gravity pointing when we first formed our sulfide traps, because this is going to tell us where we're going to find our nickel in such a big system. The seismic stuff that we did pointed and allowed us to see, if you can see on the right-hand side of that image, this is a peroxenite layer that forms with successive injections of magma into the carboid system. And that peroxenite gabbro interface is solely controlled by gravity when it comes into the system. So we were able to actually model that in 3D. And what we found is that the lower we go into the system, which is going towards the left, we're finding that surface that was originally horizontally controlled by gravity is starting to get warped. And the more that surface gets warped, the more we start to understand the dynamics that are actually happening inside the system. So it's all very well to think, hey, yeah, we've got a chronolith, and the bottom of it stayed nice and steady over time. But actually, as the system inflated, as we pumped more magma into the top, the actual basal contact got moved around. It's got pushed into completely different angles that we wouldn't expect. We have another section called Moss Geel, and Moss Geel has actually thermally eroded itself some 300 or 400 metres down into the footwall sediments. So the basal contact that if you're trying to drill and you do not have access to can actually look a very lot different than what it was when it first lay down. So we're now in a position that we can take all of this information and put our basal contact back to how it used to look when the nickel first formed in these traps. And we get some very interesting answers when we do that. For example, where the word Moss Geel is, we thought was actually the base of the intrusion. In fact, it's not the base of the intrusion, it's on a sidewall position. And the base of the intrusion is actually further to the south at an area called Sir William Wallace, another area called Tregurtha, where a lot of historical drilling has been done. Nickel sulfides have been located. They've never actually drilled the basal contact itself. these holes all went parallel to the base of contact because no one understood the angles of it. But through the seismic, we're starting to really get a sense of which way this intrusion was actually sitting when it was laid down. So that's going to certainly help us in our exploration. And at the bottom line of this is that we now have an exploration window, if you like, on which we have our JORC-compliant exploration target. We have that properly located in 3D space, and we can go targeting this space of contact at depth with a hell of a lot more confidence than the previous people have been able to do. And that's purely and simply through just applying new models, new technology, and the new science that's coming through. So, yeah, I guess that's we've got a lot of work to do. It's a very big slice of pie for Estrella as a small company to chew. But the more science and the more understanding we put into it, the narrower that exploration window can be, and the more successful we can be with the dollars that we have. So obviously, exploration opportunity. They made me put the slide in, and yeah, it's like I said, it's a very big slice of pie. We need to go back to Spagoville, try and extract some value from that, and then use that money to reinvest, of course, in carboid, because it's a very big and compelling target. Thank you.